Dangerously is the avoidance word for it, not yours. From your position, the love that developed between you may have felt many things: real, significant, promising, ultimately insufficient in its expression. But dangerous was probably not the dominant quality of your experience of it. Dangerous is the interior description, the avoidant's own, private, never quite articulated characterization of what the falling felt like from the inside of it. The specific, vertigo-producing, equilibrium-destroying quality of a love that exceeded the management system's capacity to keep at the level of manageable. That landed in the interior with a force that the self-sufficiency narrative had no adequate framework for accommodating. That felt, from the inside of the avoidance, carefully defended, extensively practiced, genuinely believed in psychological architecture, like the specific, unprecedented, what is happening quality of something that was threatening to dismantle the architecture from within. Dangerous because the depth exceeded what had previously been experienced without the fear reaching full activation. Dangerous because the specific quality of who you are reached the interior at a level that the management had, in previous connections, successfully prevented from being reached. Dangerous because the love, once present at the depth it reached, made the self-sufficiency narrative feel not wrong exactly, but transparently insufficient. Made the managed distance feel like what it actually was, a loss, in a way that previous connections had not made it feel. Made the avoidant aware, with a specificity and an urgency that awareness of the pattern had never previously produced, of exactly what the protection was costing. The dangerous depth was real, and it was produced by 3 specific, observable, entirely non-strategic qualities you brought to the connection. The first reason, you were the evidence against the lie. Every avoidant operates from a central, structurally embedded, felt as true lie about connection and the self. The lie has been examined throughout these pieces in various forms, but its essential content is this: genuine closeness is not survivable for me. The intimacy, the full, mutual, genuinely reciprocal closeness of 2 people who actually know each other and are actually choosing each other across time, produces, for the avoidant, a cost that exceeds the available capacity for bearing it. The loss that genuine closeness makes possible, the exposure that genuine knowing requires, the dependency that genuine choosing involves, these exceed what the avoidance system can sustain without the management protocol generating the distance that brings the demand back to manageable levels. This lie has been confirmed across the avoidance relational history by the dynamics that the lie itself produces, because the lie generates the management, and the management generates the distance, and the distance generates the pattern's familiar outcome. The connection that never quite becomes what it was reaching toward, the loss that was produced by the management rather than by the closeness itself, the specific, circular, self-confirming operation of a belief that prevents the testing of the belief against evidence that might contradict it. You were the evidence that contradicted it, not through argument. The avoidance intellectual defenses are too well developed for argument to be effective at the level where the lie lives. Through the specific, undeniable, experiential quality of being around someone whose presence did not produce the cost that the lie predicted, whose closeness did not generate the pressure that previous closeness had generated, whose genuine, non-demanding, entirely self-possessed quality of engagement with the avoidant was not activating the management at the level that engagement had previously activated it. In your presence, the lie was not confirmed. The closeness was present, genuine, deep, increasingly difficult to manage against, and the cost the lie predicted was not being produced at the level the lie predicted it would be. The avoidance interior, encountering this discrepancy between the prediction and the experience, was being presented with the most significant challenge to the lie's authority that it had ever encountered. Not the intellectual challenge of someone explaining why the avoidance fear is unfounded. The experiential challenge of someone whose actual presence was not producing the outcome the fear was predicting. The love fell dangerously deep because the evidence against the lie was accumulating in the avoidant's interior with every interaction, and the accumulating evidence was dismantling from the inside the structural belief that the management system had been built to protect. The love was dangerous because it was, for the first time, making the avoidant's most foundational, self-protective belief feel uncertain. And uncertain beliefs in the avoidant's interior do not simply generate curiosity. They generate the specific, profound, genuinely vertiginous experience of someone whose entire relational architecture is resting on a foundation that is beginning to feel less than entirely solid. The second reason, you matched the interior without requiring the exterior. The avoidance interior is, as examined across these pieces, significantly richer and more alive than the exterior management permits to be visible. The depth of feeling, the intensity of caring, the specific quality of an interior life that has been managing itself away from external expression for so long that the gap between what is felt and what is shown has become one of the defining features of the avoidance experience. All of this exists in the interior with a fullness that the exterior only partially reflects. Most of the people who have loved the avoidant have engaged primarily with the exterior, with the managed presentation, with the self-sufficient, composed, requiring nothing version of the avoidant that the management constructs for public consumption. Their love has been directed, however genuinely felt, at the constructed version rather than the actual person. And the constructed version, however competently maintained, is not the thing that produces the deep, dangerous love in the avoidant. The constructed version can be liked, can be admired, can be engaged with warmly and consistently without ever reaching the interior where the genuine falling happens. You engaged with the interior, not through any deliberate strategy of getting beneath the surface, not through the therapeutic approach of someone who understood the architecture and was finding the gaps, through the specific, natural, entirely unperformed quality of someone whose own depth of perception reached the avoidance depth of interior as a natural consequence of both people being present at the level they were present at. You saw the real thing, not all of it. The management is too effective for anyone to see all of it before the avoidant is ready, but more than the constructed version, the specific, recognizable, genuine interior of someone who is more complicated and more feeling and more longing than the management permitted to be visible, seen through the gaps in the management, not because you were looking for the gaps, but because your quality of perception was simply the kind that reaches beneath surfaces. And crucially, you did not require the seeing to be validated, did not press toward the exposure of what you had seen, did not use the perception as leverage or as the basis for expectations that the avoidant then felt the management familiar pressure to manage against. You simply saw and stayed with the seeing, with the warmth and the patience and the entirely non-demanding quality of someone who was interested in the real thing and was willing to be present with it at the pace the avoidance system permitted. This matching of the interior without requiring the exterior is the rarest quality available in the relational world. The avoidant has, across their entire history, been met at the exterior, engaged with the constructed version, loved for the managed presentation, or been pressed toward the exterior by people whose genuine caring nevertheless arrived as pressure to show more than the management currently permitted. The combination of interior-reaching perception and non-pressuring patience, seeing the real thing and not making the real thing's visibility a demand, is the specific quality that produced the dangerous depth, because it was the quality that reached the interior without activating the management's most powerful response, without the pressure that the management was built to manage against. The falling happened in the specific, unprecedented, management underprepared space of someone who was reaching the interior without generating the alarm that interior reaching had always previously generated. The third reason, you loved yourself in a way that made the avoidant's self-abandonment visible. The avoidant has made a specific, long-standing, never quite articulated agreement with themselves. The agreement is this: the management is necessary. The distance is the cost of safety. The suppression of the needing is the price of the functioning. The self-sufficiency narrative, however much effort it requires to maintain, is worth the maintaining because the alternative, the genuine, needing, wanting, vulnerable to loss interior, is not something that can be safely inhabited without the protection the management provides. This agreement has been sustained across the avoidant's entire relational history by the absence of a clear alternative, by the absence of someone who demonstrated, through the visible, daily, entirely genuine quality of their own relationship with themselves, that the alternative was livable, that someone could have genuine depth of feeling and genuine needs and genuine vulnerability to loss and not require the management's elaborate architecture of self-protection to sustain their functioning, that the interior, the actual, unmanaged, complicated, needing interior, could be inhabited directly without the intermediary of the management, and that the inhabiting of it could be not catastrophic, but simply, honestly, humanly alive. You were that demonstration, not through any statement about how the avoidant should live, through the visible, genuine, entirely your own quality of someone who loved themselves in the specific, active, daily sense of someone who has a real and settled relationship with their own worth, who expressed needs without the prior calculation of whether the expression would be received, who disagreed without the prior assessment of whether the disagreement would be welcomed, who brought the full, complicated, unmodified reality of who they are to every interaction without the management's editorial function determining what should be shown and what should be contained. The avoidant, watching this, not analyzing it, not consciously assessing it, but receiving it in the specific, perceptive, below-conscious processing way of someone whose interior is always more alive to the truth of another person than the managed engagement suggests, was watching someone do the thing that the management was installed to prevent the avoidant from doing, was watching someone inhabit their own interior directly, without protection, without the architecture, with the specific, grounded, entirely functional quality of someone who had discovered that the interior, however complicated and however needing, was survivable, was more than survivable, was the source of the specific, genuine, non-constructed richness that made you the kind of person who generated the dangerous depth in the first place. The seeing of this did not produce the immediate dismantling of the management. The management does not dismantle in response to evidence. It requires the slower, more demanding, more internally costly process examined in the healing piece, but it produced something that the management had never previously had to contain. The specific, interior, foundational question that the demonstration of your self-love installed in the avoidant's most private reckoning: what is the management actually protecting me from? The question, once genuinely asked, once it arrived with the force that the demonstration of your genuine self-inhabiting produced, was the most dangerous thing the love introduced into the avoidant's interior. More dangerous than the feeling itself, because the feeling could be managed. The question, genuinely held, threatened to reveal that the management might be protecting the avoidant from the very thing that the dangerous depth of the love for you had just demonstrated was possible. The genuinely inhabited life, the actually lived interior, the specific, alive, non-managed quality of someone who has not agreed to the self-abandonment. The avoidant fell dangerously deep in love with you for 3 reasons that are, at their core, the same reason expressed in 3 different forms. You were the evidence against the lie. You matched the interior without requiring the exterior. You loved yourself in a way that made the avoidant's self-abandonment visible. 3 ways of being the same thing. The person who demonstrated, through the entirely non-strategic quality of simply being who you are, that the architecture the avoidant had built was built to protect against something that, in your presence, was not the threat the fear had always claimed it was. The love was dangerous because it was true, because it reached the place where true things live, because it installed, in the most defended interior, the avoidant knew how to construct, the specific and irreversible knowledge that the protection was costing more than the thing it was protecting against, and that the thing it was protecting against, the genuine, alive, needing, loving, losing, risk-accepting, fully inhabited self, was not the catastrophe the fear had promised. It was the life, the actual life, the one that was always available on the other side of the management, and that you, simply by being who you were, made undeniable.